Hey guys, welcome to SideQuest Podcast, the unofficial podcast of Fitocracy. Have a great guest here for you tonight, but before we get to introducing the guest, if you have not checked us out on iTunes and hit subscribe there and left us a review, please, after you get done listening to the show, head over to iTunes, hit subscribe, leave us a review, helps us move up the charts so more people can see us and hear the awesome guests that we have. Plus, I do want to hit that goal of hitting the What's Hot section before the end of the year. So you got to help me out with that. Leave the reviews and subscribe. If you want to check us out on Twitter and follow us there, we're at SideQuestFM. We're also on Instagram at SideQuestFM. And you can find us on Facebook as well. Just search SideQuest Podcast. Like us there. Check us out there. You can also check out the website at SideQuestPodcast.com. You can email me guests you'd like to see or things you want to hear. And also check out the blog there as well. The guest that I have on tonight is a very big deal in the powerlifting world. He has held world records at one time. He has written for everything there is imaginable, ranging from T-Nation to Fitocracy to the Personal Trainer Development Center, as well as his own site. And I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to introduce the guest, and we'll talk about his stuff a little later on. But Greg Nuckols, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. It's good to be here.
Cool. So tell us a little about yourself, Greg, for those who may not know who Greg Nuckols is.
Oh man, this is what I was saying as soon as we went live. I don't really have that much to say about myself. I don't suppose. I don't know if you have questions that would probably get me to be more expansive.
Okay. How did you get into fitness? Now I know from reading your site that you started lifting at a pretty early age.
Yeah.
So what? For most people at that age, you were a young teenager. Most young teenagers, I was sitting at home playing video games, and didn't touch weights until high school, and then didn't touch them again until after college.
Yeah.
So, like, how did you get into it, and what spurred you and the love and the passion behind it?
Well, I was a pretty atypical teenager, and by that I mean I was a pretty boring teenager. I mean, basically my life was school and sports, and yeah, I started lifting to get better at basketball and football, and when those two were no longer an option, I just stuck with lifting. Okay,
so and you are not, correct me if I'm wrong, you were originally from North Carolina?
I'm back in North Carolina now. I was in California this summer. My wife had an internship at the Orange County Register, newspaper out there. And now I'm back in North Carolina for the holidays and heading to Tampa in January.
Okay, cool. So did you grow up in North Carolina, or did you grow up in Florida?
I've lived in North Carolina my whole life.
Good to hear. I'm a Carolina boy as well. So
yeah. Are you from North Carolina?
I am. I'm from High Point. I know you are in Moxville right now, so that's not too far from where I grew up.
Yeah, I saw the 919 area code, so I was thinking it was somewhere around there.
Oh yeah, the wonders of the furniture capital of the world, High Point. So you played football and basketball. So what position did you play in basketball? Just because I'm a big basketball fan.
Basketball, I was a center until 9th grade. I hit my growth spurt early. I'm about 5'10" now, and I was 5'9" in 6th grade. So I was the biggest kid on the team then, and I just stopped growing. So in 9th grade, I made the transition from center to point guard.
Okay. All right. That's usually what happens around that age time. You're like, oh, I don't grow anymore. Now I got to learn a whole new position.
And then in football, I played a little bit of everything, mostly tight end, but I played tight end and some slot receiver and everywhere on the defensive line.
Okay, cool. So, as I did mention in the intro, you are a power lifter. You've actually held like world records,
yes.
which is crazy. And I saw a video that you posted the other day of just doing a pause squat with like 315 on your back, and I just shook my head and wanted to start crying because no, I'm still getting up there. So what is your ultimate goal as a powerlifter? Like where is the peak for Greg Nuckols?
I honestly don't know. I don't have any like long-term goals. Right now, I really want to hit a 2,000 total. And after that, the numbers I want to hit before it's all said and done is I want to squat 8 and bench 5 and deadlift 8. And I'm not really looking too far past that right now.
Okay. You're still young. You got plenty of time to keep going. So I do want to talk a little about your articles because you are an extensive writer, and your stuff it's in depth and there's a lot of knowledge and there's a lot of facts in it. And for me, I enjoy that because I'm a huge nerd, and I love science. I love kind of looking at the data and the way things work and looking for the most logical sense to do things. So as I'm reading through everything, I found that you really strive to get all the relevant facts before you present a side of an argument. So where does this come from? Were you like on a debate team? Did you think about going to law school, or do you just kind of like the science of argumentation?
I think a lot of it just has to do with my upbringing. My mother was very, very smart and very, very in your face. And so how I communicate on my blog is just basically how I communicated at home growing up. Something, and you'll probably notice this as the podcast rolls on, but I'm not a very good conversationalist. I usually speak in just like one sentence answers or incomplete paragraphs. So when I write, really what I do is I type relatively fast. So I gather the information and have just like a rough outline, and then pretty much just like type as I'm giving a speech in my head, and then just go back and do edits. But yeah, that's what you see on the site is just kind of it's pretty much the flow of how my brain works, just in general.
Okay, because I didn't know if you had like you sit down and you do like the whole writing thing where you're like, all right, I have this guide of where I want to go, and I'm going to set up like this A point and this B point, and then I have this fact to back up that, or you really just kind of are like Bruce Banner and just, with the strength and the knowledge, just kind of throw it all out.
I mean, I beforehand, all of the sources that I want to use, I'll copy and paste them into a document so I have them all there in one place. And I'll kind of go through what I want to say in my head and make sure I have evidence to support it all. But it's not really that like thorough and tedious of a process. Yeah, I pretty much just sit down and write. But I will say, like that, it makes it sound a lot easier than it is. One of the tips that I would give to people who want to get into writing is do the time and expect most of it to be really terrible. Mm-hmm. Like my website is just now starting to take off, but I've been keeping it for about 3 years now. And for about 2.5 years, nobody cared at all because most of the stuff was terrible. But I just made a habit of sitting down and just setting a minimum of 1,000 words a day. And if you pound out 1,000 words a day long enough, eventually they'll become 1,000 somewhat readable words a day.
So sort of like the old experiment that you could actually just sit monkeys down long enough and they would eventually type Shakespeare.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
I think that's an old theater joke that I learned in college or something. So you've been doing this for a while and you've researched and you've got a lot of knowledge, like you said, and you've been putting all this out for 2 or 3 years. And that's a long time to write. So a lot of things have probably changed from the beginning to now. So what is one thing that you previously believed and through research have actually come to say, well, I guess I was wrong about that?
That's a good question. And if I had a bit to think, I'm sure I could come up with a long list. On the spot, I used to be all about ketogenic diets, which I'm not anymore. And I actually think that's a really good segue to talk about two different topics. One is the Dunning-Kruger effect, and the other is I guess like how you can package almost science to seem really, really scientific and prey on the ignorance of others. So
Right.
Dunning-Kruger effect, I'm sure you know what that is, but for the people listening who don't know, it's based off of a seminal paper. The lead author was David Dunning, and the basic premise of it is the skills it takes to be really good at something are the same skills that it takes to know if you're good at something. And so a rather unsavory implication of that is if you're stupid, you don't know you're stupid. And, like, obviously, knowledge is very domain dependent. Like a rocket scientist and a brain surgeon are both very smart, but the brain surgeon knows nothing about rocket science and vice versa. So the Dunning-Kruger effect, it doesn't just apply to stupid people. It can apply to very, very smart people who just don't know enough about the topic they're talking about to realize they don't know enough about the topic they're talking about. So, so I used to be all about ketogenic diets and stuff because, I stumbled across some blogs and websites and a few studies, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is so cool. There's all of this science, and why did I not learn about this in my nutrition classes I took? And it was like the way it was packaged, it was very, very appealing and believable. But, you can take research and you can find like one or two studies, especially if you're not particularly scientifically literate, and think that you're getting the full picture of something when you're really not at all. And until you just take the time to read more and more research, you don't really know what the whole body of evidence is saying. But yeah, so that was something that I used to be all about until, and I was all about it because like I've always been one to try to seek out the science of stuff, and so my problem there is I found science to support it, and it led me to really stupid beliefs. Where when I had more science, I realized they were stupid beliefs. So that's talking more about believing things on like what constitutes sufficient evidence to believe something. And I guess another unfortunate thing is until you know what is out there, you don't know whether or not you have sufficient evidence to believe something.
Right. Yeah. And along that same line, I actually wrote an article for the blog about, and I titled it "My Time in the Church of Paleo," because I did that. I went really low carb, and I did really well for a while, but I never got down to like the shreddedness that I ever wanted to be until I actually started eating carbs and really learning how like all of that fit in. So it was funny because I would tell people that like I would eat some bread and people would be like, "But I didn't think you ate that anymore," and it felt weird because you were kind of like, "Oh great, now everyone thinks that I'm this guy," and now you're going back like.
Yeah.
It just, yeah. It's kind of hard because you want to give science, but then I feel like half the time I was just giving a bunch of BS. Like I fluffed all this stuff up and made it sound pretty, but then once I realized that there was science behind it that actually disproved it, I kind of felt dumb.
Well, that's a really good point too, because there you're getting into you're getting notions of social proof. So, like humans, we aren't lone wolves. Like humans are pack animals, and one of our strongest impulses is consistency. Because for group adhesion, like you need to know that when someone in your group does something, that you can more or less expect those same beliefs and those same behaviors from them. Like, we expect consistency from others, and we feel that belief coming from other people. And so, like, what you're talking about, people are like, oh, I didn't think you ate that anymore. Like, that's going to make you feel, at least to some degree, like, especially if the people saying that are other people who are still currently, like, paleo dieters or hardcore low carbers, like, that's going to make you feel a little pressure to continue in those beliefs, maybe necessarily, or after you realize you don't have sufficient reason to believe them anymore.
Yeah, yeah. So this actually kind of segues into a question that I had. So you did ketogenic for a while, and now you learned some science, and you learned that that's not necessarily, for the goals you have and wanting to do what you want to do, the best avenue of approach. So what does a Greg Nuckols daily diet look like?
Okay, this is don't take this as like a model diet, because
well, I know you enjoy washing everything down with a tasty beer.
well, yeah, I mean, definitely that. I'm the type of person who, like, I either do things 100% or not at all. And right now, like, business stuff is my number one concern. And then after that, training, and then diet is, and not, like, relationships, life in general, that's one. Then business stuff, then training, and diet is somewhere farther down there. So this is not how I would recommend someone set up their diet, but since you asked how a current day of eating looks for me, usually, more often than not, I forget to eat until like 5 or 6 p.m. I mean, I'm just busy. I get up and I get to work, and then stand up to pee or something, and I realize that I'm really lightheaded, and then I think, well, when did I eat last? Oh, yesterday. And so usually I'll eat something at like 5 or 6. Not very much. Usually just something quick so I can keep working, and then work out sometime around 7 or 8, and then when I get back from the gym, just eat everything.
All right. So you kind of practice a long, extended period of intermittent fasting in a way.
Yeah, and that's not what I recommend at all. I mean, my physique's better and my training's better when I'm consistently eating, 3, 4, 5 meals a day, spaced evenly throughout the day. That's what I recommend. And definitely that's what I'll do when I start prepping for a meet. I mean, currently my schedule is working 12 to 14 hours a day, and I just don't have time to eat. So I don't.
Understandable. So lifting, you mentioned that it's a little further down in your goals right now, with life and work and family and relationships. So what is one non-fitness or non-powerlifting goal that you want to accomplish at some point in your life?
Well, right now I'm about to enroll in a master's program, and I want to eventually go through and get my PhD. So that's more of like a short to medium-term goal. So I guess knock that out first, and then see what happens. And also, something just kind of a pie-in-the-sky goal that I've had in mind for a long time is I want to get 1 million monthly visitors to my site. But that's also a decent ways off.
That's a hefty goal. I get like 3 a day, so that's a good goal. And you've been working at it for a couple of years, and like you said, you've seen a slow rise. I don't think a lot of people realize that. You hear about people who go, "Oh, I'm a blogger," and you think, "Oh God, you made it overnight." No, some of these people have been blogging for 7 or 8 years, and
that's something that I got from Saul Orwell, the one of the guys behind examine.com. Yeah. He's been a serial entrepreneur and has been successful in pretty much everything he's ever done. I met him at the fitness summit this past year, mm-hmm. And one of the things he said that really stuck with me and has really like rung true with my life experience as well is people get this notion that like they're going to do something because they're passionate about it, but like that's really not a good way to set yourself up for success long term, because passion it's really only going to carry you so far. Like, more often than not, things aren't going to be fun or particularly enjoyable. Like, you're going to have more, you're going to deal with more ungrateful people than grateful people, and more shitty days than really good days. And that's really what it takes to be successful in just about everything. So more than loving your pursuit and becoming infatuated with the passion you have for it, you really just need to learn to love and embrace the grind. Like, the thing that you should look forward to is grinding towards your goals, and like, just embracing the process of it, because if what you're basing everything on is solely outcome dependent, the successes, like the big wins that you really look forward to, are few and far between, and if they're what keep you going, you're not going to keep going long enough to be successful.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one thing I've learned in my own life, is that we're so goal oriented. I don't know if it was like our generation being like so test driven and test based at school, that no, you've got this end of grade testing, you got to get this test, you got to get this, you got to put in this work to get a better grade, but no one really, like, it's the grade that everyone looks at. They don't look at the process, and then when you get out of math class, you're like, I don't remember anything.
Yeah.
So I know for me, like, trying to find, falling in love with the process and just letting it go and not worrying about, whether I've gained this on a lift, or this looks better in the mirror, or whatever. Just that it's the process. Enjoy it, learn, and just go with the flow. On that, so as a person who has set powerlifting records, I saw a video of you squatting 700 pounds or over 700 pounds, which is amazing. But what is your weakest lift that you struggle with? And are you trying to improve it, or do you just not pay as much attention to it?
Weakest lift, like, out of the big three, or just in general?
Well, I know out of the big three, your weakest is probably the bench, which is typically you're going to be stronger in the legs versus squat and deadlift and bench. But I mean, is there a lift that, like, you struggle with, that you really kind of hate and don't want to do a lot, that might be your weakest? Or is there a portion of your lifting that is your weakest and the hardest one for you to get stronger at?
My lifts they're fairly balanced. Proportionally, I would say probably my deadlift is the weakest. The main reason for that is I just don't train it as often. But usually when my squat goes up, my deadlift comes along for the ride. So no, I don't. Like, I kind of, like, I feel sort of very insane this, but as a powerlifter, I don't really think I have any really major glaring weaknesses right now, at least insofar as they affect my big three. The reason I asked if one of the big three or just something else in the gym, I have pathetically weak biceps. Like, you have no idea how weak. Well, I'll give you an idea how weak they are. I did dumbbell curls 2 days ago, and 25-pound dumbbells for sets of 10 to 12 that was all I could handle. But yeah, so I have stupidly weak biceps. But no, my squat, bench, and deadlift are pretty balanced.
Okay. So I want to ask a couple fun questions here, and then we'll kind of get back to talking about your articles. So what is there a television show or a book or something that you're really digging on right now? I know you said you're really busy, but in your spare time, is there something you're kind of itching to watch, or you're enjoying reading?
I like Last Week Tonight with John Oliver,
Okay.
and I like The Daily Show. And as far as books go, I'm in the middle of Social Intelligence by Daniel Coleman, and it's very good so far.
Okay. All right. So as a man who enjoys beers, and I do see you post them on Twitter all the time with your dinner. I know you've been in California, which has great microbrews. North Carolina has some great stuff coming up, and has in the last couple of years started to really uh, put its foot out there in the microbrew scene. And you're heading back to Tampa, Florida itself as well. And I know you just came from a cross country trip. So, what beer would you say that all of America should know about, but the beer is either too small and not distributed nationally, or it's only a local brew in a small city?
Oh man. Um, oh, that's a tough question. Just one?
I or a couple. I mean, I guess I thought of one because there may be some that's only in like say one town in California that you're like everyone should have this beer. Because for me, I love beer, but I've gotten to the point where I'm so tired of IPAs because you could put 12 IPAs in front of me and I would not be able to tell you the difference between any of them, like who is who. And I just keep waiting for someone to come out with a beer that just like blows my mind, and I'm like, this is no one's ever had this. This is totally new.
Do you drink much Belgian beer?
I do occasionally. They're just the ones that I find here in Richmond tend to be like $9, $12, $13, and I'm a cheapo because my wife is in grad school and I'm kind of handling everything. So I drink cheap.
Do you have a Trader Joe's nearby?
We do have a Trader Joe's.
They've got some good Belgians for this. But yeah, Belgian beer is usually pretty expensive, but beer is really the only thing I spend much money on, so I don't really cut many corners there. I mean, the stuff that comes out, there's one particular beer that like one Trappist monastery puts out every 2 years, and it's like $100 a bottle, and I'm not gonna take that plunge, but yeah, I really like. Oh, come on, brain. I'm blanking. Chimay. Have you had that?
Chimay red or Chimay blue?
Blue. The quad. Oh my goodness, that is sweet, sweet nectar.
So good. Actually, my favorite brewery is Amagon, and I actually got to go there in Cooperstown when I went to the Baseball Hall of Fame when I lived in New York City for a couple of years, and I got to have Three Philosophers, which is my hands down favorite beer.
One second. 1 second.
Oh no! Don't tell me you're gonna open one.
This was 2 nights ago. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, am I not on video?
No, we're on audio. Because of bandwidth.
I was running to grab a bottle of Three Philosophers.
Oh, so jealous. Yeah, it for some reason the price of it here in Richmond went way up. Like it went from like 3 or 4 months ago, I could get it for like $10. Now it's like 13. I'm like, I love it, but it's got to like New Year's. I'll do it for New Year's, but
I gotcha. That's rough.
Cool. All right. Well, let me go back to a couple questions I had from some articles that you had written because as I said, I love your writing and I love just digging in and reading everything that you talk about. So this one is a little bit older, and I think probably a year or so ago. And this is something that I've had on my mind. And I had Brian Cron on the show, and I asked him about it because he had a very similar article about you wrote an article about masculinity and manhood, and it stuck out to me because yes, I do sometimes go into the gym, bro, who unfortunately, like as I'm lifting something heavy, I let out a gorilla Chewbacca type yell or something, and I shouldn't, but then I kind of like puff my chest up and I'm like, stop being that bro. But it's your ideas on manhood and you know, the alpha culture that has kind of come up, and I have my own thoughts on that, in that I think it was kind of a reaction to the metrosexual movement of the mid 2000s. So as kind of like a counterbalance, men went, no, we must be manly, which is why everyone grows beards now. Not that that's why you have a beard, but Anyways, I'm rambling. So you wrote that at a pretty young age. So how did you develop this idea of manhood and masculinity before you were kind of like 21, when most men are still kind of like puffing out their chests and trying to be the manliest of men?
I don't know. I mean, it just didn't really seem like it was accomplishing much. I mean, I can't speak as if I'm an expert on what it means to be a man, but just my own subjective opinion, it basically means, taking care of business and being comfortable in your own skin. And as I see it, like, if you're having to go like that far out of your way to prove to someone how much of a man you are, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot and proving the opposite. Um, yeah, I don't know. Don't. Now, one thing that does irk me quite a bit is how beards are like kind of almost fetishized these days. I've had a beard since I was 12. And then, well, I take that back. That's the first time that I grew like a goatee. I've only been clean shaven once since I was 16. My then girlfriend, now wife, her dad made me shave before I could take her to prom.
Not even for the wedding, for prom.
Well, I mean, at that point, she was still living under his roof, and he could set the rules and whatnot. But yeah, and now people are like, oh, you have a beard, that's so trendy. No, like, I'm a Nuckols man. People from where I'm from know who we are, and we just have beards. It's not like something that's enforced, but it's just kind of expected. Like, we have good beards, so we grow beards.
Hey, my dad has had a beard for years. I remember he shaved it once, and we were really, really, really young, like 8 or 9. Now he was like, I have to shave it for work. We're like, you should get a new job, because he just didn't look like dad. And I too can grow mine out fairly quickly. I'm rocking the stash now only because it annoys my wife. And I like to annoy my wife.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I wanted to ask this one. So you wrote an article about fitness BS, and everyone in the fitness industry and everyone who tries to get in shape, we see it. You're in the grocery store, Cosmo or some magazine has something, and I just sometimes want to buy all of them so no one ever sees them, but I don't have that kind of cash flow. So what is one piece of fitness BS that you as a coach, because I know you do coaching as well, one thing that you have to fight the most that you wish would just go away?
Honestly, right now, I don't really have too much of that. The majority of people who know about me, like for coaching, find me through my website, or someone who I'm currently coaching recommends me, and then they'll like send people to my website. So most people who come to me for coaching basically know most of what I think and what I'm about before I make first contact with them. But I would say just in general, the majority of the really bad ideas out there that I come in contact with most often are either nutrition related. Keto doesn't seem to be quite as popular anymore, but there's still a lot of people who are all about paleo, which I will say, I think paleo has gotten a fair amount of undeserved hate recently. I see a backlash against it, which I feel is a bit of an overreaction. Like, I understand the people's positions that, like, people freaking out too much about chemicals, like that's mongering and making people orthorexic. But I mean, the basics of paleo, like eat a diet primarily of like meat, fruits, veggies, eggs. Like, I don't really see what's too wrong with that. Like, as far as fad diets go, I think it's better than most fad diets. But yeah. I see a lot of stuff with nutrition, and then also just various minimalistic workout ideas. And I think a lot of that just comes from the fact that they sell easy. If you tell someone you can get better results with less work, I mean, obviously that's an easy sell. And most of the people I'm coaching are powerlifters or want to become powerlifters. And I think that can be a damaging mindset, because there you have to ask yourself, like, what your goals are. And if someone just says, like, I want to get a little bigger and stronger, and I want to lose some weight, then that person really probably doesn't need to put in that much effort at the gym. Like 2-3 times a week, 45 minutes, watch their diet. Like, that's going to cover their bases. Someone who wants to be competitive in powerlifting, especially at a high level, you really need to learn to embrace diminishing returns. Because let's say you can get, just applying the 80-20 rule. Let's say you get 80% of your results from your first 2 hours in the gym per week, but you want to get 100% of your results because you want to be as competitive as you possibly can. And 100% of your results comes at 7 or 8 hours in the gym a week. Well, then, the whole concept of minimalism and trying to get as much out of as little as possible, it's really shooting yourself in the foot if your goal is to get the best results you possibly can. Like, you have to learn, to love doing 3 times as much work for incrementally better results. And that's not something that sells well. Like, you're not going to see a magazine ad that says work 3 times as much to get a little bit better. But I mean, for just to compete in about any sport at a high level, that's what it takes.
Right. I mean, Peyton Manning is the first one in, the last one out. He's not, even on a day off, he's there. Yeah, I agree with that. Which is why, personally for myself, like I've started doing chest twice a week, because it is by far the weakest thing in my like plethora of lifts.
Mm-hmm.
That I was like, no, I'm going to get better, so I'm going to double up and hit it twice a week. So on that with
well, and
strength,
I'll say this. I think that distinction is kind of funny, because like right now I consider myself to be doing a pretty low volume program, just because lifting isn't really high priority right now. But for me, that means I'm usually in the gym. It was about 3 times a week a few weeks ago, but nowadays it's 4 or 5 times a week. I prefer 6 or 7, but right now I'm at 4 or 5 times a week. And I'm benching 4 or 5 times a week, squatting like 4 times a week, and deadlifting 2 or 3 times a week. And like that's my idea of low volume and relative frequency.
Okay, all right. So not a lot of like full rest days there. But I understand that, because I do want to get this book that I know a few people have mentioned. A guy wrote called Squat Every Day. Because I squatted 3 times a week for a while, and then I couldn't fit into my my suit pants that I had tailored for my wedding, and I was like, nope, that's it. I got to cut it back to once a week. I can't spend $600 on a tailor-made suit and then not be able to fit into it.
Yeah.
But on that idea of strength athletes and getting better, people who want to compete and get stronger, I reached out to a friend of mine. He's a mutual friend on Facebook, and asked him. I said, all right, if you could ask Greg Nuckols one thing, what would it be? And his question was, what types of food should strength athletes stick to in their diets, and what frequency of time should they eat it?
Well, I feel like the types of food is a little bit off base. Okay, another concept that I feel like has gotten a little bit too much of an undeserved backlash recently is the concept of clean eating. And again, I understand like diet adherence and the risk of developing orthorexia, but I have an issue with some people's messaging of it, like completely poo-pooing the concept. Just for athletic goals and general health as well. Even though you can't like necessarily pin down what clean eating necessarily like even though you can't like sort every single food into clean and unclean unless you're reading the book of Leviticus. Um, most of us have a basic idea of what foods are good for you in general to eat a lot all the time and what foods aren't. So yeah, just focus on meat, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, eggs, milk. Um, Again, this is another thing that I feel like has gotten way too much backlash. But the whole idea of just basically, if you can find it on the perimeter of a supermarket, it's probably something that's decent to eat pretty frequently. Try to get enough protein, just to ballpark it about a gram per pound, and make sure your calories are in line. And then in terms of when you eat it and how often, I don't really think there's any need to go like the old bodybuilding staple of 6 meals a day, but
Right.
3, 4, 5 meals evenly spaced throughout the day. That'll cover that'll easily meet the 80-20 rule for diet.
Okay. All right. And I got that from a few articles you did mention, because I do intermittent fasting, and I know you kind of had a thing on it's great for dieting, but not the best thing for muscle building. Um, I don't know. I like it because it keeps me. I feel like I have better control over not eating donuts when people bring them into work, because I'm like, no, I'm not going to eat until noon. Whereas if I didn't, I feel like I might give into that a little more. And people at my work, dear God, there's like food every other day. It's like, come on, people.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, and that's a good point, because like you're like right now you're not shooting to break powerlifting records or step on the Mr. Olympia stage. Like when you're talking about the types of things that matter and the types of things that don't matter, it's all completely in the context of the individual and their goals.
Right.
So like if someone is just generally trying to lose weight or just look good, there's really not that much that matters. Like, as long as their calories are in line and as long as they're eating enough protein, like literally no other diet factor matters, unless you have like a severe nutrient deficiency that's gonna kill you or something. But like, just in terms of big picture, get your calories, get your protein in line. That's enough for most people most of the time. But then going back to diminishing returns, when I was talking about training volume, then something like meal timing or something like food quality or something like what supplements you take, like those things really don't play enough of a role for most people to have to worry about them. But, let's say you have a meet in 12 weeks and you're dead set on hitting the highest total possible at that meet, or you have a bodybuilding show coming up and you're dead set on being 5% body fat on stage. Then those things that make much, much less of a difference than just getting your calories and protein in line, then those things are very important. So, you can't just. I feel like people try to dichotomize too much stuff and just say like these are the important factors and these are the unimportant factors for everybody at all places at all times. But it's really much more of a context-specific thing. Like, the things that are important for me as a competitive athlete, if I'm prepping for a meet, are there are many more things that fall in that realm than that would fall in that realm for you.
Right. Okay. All right. I got a couple fun ones, and a few more here before we close out the podcast here. So this one, I write really long questions sometimes, so bear with me. So I was reading one of your articles, and you wrote an article about finding legitimate advice, and not to assume just because some guy is jacked that he knows what he's talking about when it comes to fitness. And I totally agree with that. There are tons of people out there, and even people in the gym, they may just be really good at lifting weights and have a great metabolism and eat right, but they don't really understand, the minutia of a lift or the proper techniques. So when it comes to fitness advice, who do you drop everything or get really excited about when they release a new blog post or book?
Oh man, this is probably not going to make me too many friends, but I really don't spend hardly any time at all reading articles or blogs. Um, I mean, I just don't. I really like the blog Subversity. A German physics professor, El Musa from Germany. That's his blog. It's basically a research review of like new research that's coming out. That's very good. The Alan Aragon research review that's a no-brainer. It's fantastic.
Right.
Right. And the all of the strength and conditioning research publications, the Chris Beardsley and Brett Contreras, all of those are very, very good as well. In terms of like popular level fitness information, Subversity, Alan Aragon Research Review, and everything from strengthandconditioningresearch.com. I keep up with those, and beyond that, I mostly just spend time in PubMed or reading textbooks.
Okay. All right. All right. So real quick, I just want you to kind of touch on it because I know we're running pretty long here. So you do Juggernaut training. So for people who are unfamiliar with this, and this is for like the intense power lifters, for people who don't know what it is, can you describe quickly what Juggernaut training is?
Yeah, it's Juggernaut Training Systems is a popular level strength sports website. It covers powerlifting and weightlifting and CrossFit. Basically, it's trying to be what T Nation was before they really sold out. Like, you know, and that may sound funny to some people, but I was reading T Nation back in like 2003 or so. They really started falling off about 2009, 2010. But man, initially, like their site was very, very good. Like they had a lot of scientists on their writing, and they had a lot of coaches who weren't just like keyboard warriors, but who actually had like legitimate training practices and were producing high-level athletes. It used to be a very, very good website before they just completely jumped the shark. But basically, that's what Juggernaut tries to do. Is if you scroll through the article archives, you probably won't see just a ton of names you're familiar with, because what we really try to do is seek out people who are actually like producing the results regularly for their athletes that people are trying to achieve. So, like anybody can sit down behind a keyboard and punch out an article that sounds good. I mean, the barriers to entry there are very, very low. So what we do is we look for authors, and there's two completely different skill sets there. Like, one is being able to like write well and message well and communicate a point. The other skill set is like actually being able to apply information and train athletes and get people the results they want. So we seek out that second group of people. And my job as editor is basically to take the things they're saying and to make it, and basically just to like improve the messaging so it's like readable and so it'll connect to a broader audience. Because if you're a coach and the majority of the communication you're doing is to, like, say, D1 level football players in the weight room, that doesn't necessarily translate to a beautiful, well-written article. So basically, we seek those people out, and they write stuff, and I bounce some ideas off them, and we clean it up to where, like, the content is very professional and readable, but it's coming from people who may not necessarily be really super connected in the online ecosphere, but who are doing the things that everyone else is just writing about.
Okay, cool. So one of your articles I laughed at, I really enjoyed, and I had a similar tip this summer and thought about it myself when I was looking at buying a new phone. Do you still not have a smartphone?
No, I do now. Yeah, I do now. My old brick finally bit the dust.
I have to say I enjoyed that article because I was like, man, he's so right. I shouldn't have this stupid thing, but it's just so freaking convenient for crap.
I'll say you and everyone asking these questions, you guys went way back in my archives. Like it's it's taking me a second to remember what articles you're talking about. But I mean that's a good thing. I didn't know anyone still read those.
Oh, dude, I dove into dude, I was at the laundromat last night and even last weekend because the Panthers were getting their asses kicked. I was like, screw this, I don't want to watch it. Time to read Greg Nuckols. Oh yeah, dude, I do thorough research before I interview anyone. I want to know. I'm not just gonna skim the surface. And you're right, and your writing is so good. Like it it doesn't go over anyone's head. Like I feel like anyone can read it and not have to have like a science degree, and they get it. But it's also so smart that I feel like it makes so much sense, but I also feel so dumb because it makes so much sense that I'm like, why didn't you think about that? Like, it's
You can
a weird thing.
you can mostly thank my wife for that. She was a journalism major. She's a very, very good writer, and she works with me now, but until 3 weeks ago, she had absolutely nothing to do with the fitness industry. So before I click publish, I sent her the stuff that I write, and she lets me know like what of it is actually like readable and what of it is me just being a nerd and needs to be explained more.
I do the same thing. I usually go, hey babe, I know you have like 3 papers that you have to proofread and tons of other students that papers that you have to read. But could you read this blog post to make sure I don't sound like an idiot?
What's she in school for?
She's getting her Master's of Fine Arts in Theater Pedagogy at Virginia Commonwealth University.
That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So she's got an interview for a college in St. Augustine next week. So I'm hoping, because I prefer Florida than New England because it's warm, and even though my Scottish blood and my Viking heritage would love that cold weather, I grew up in North Carolina. Snow and me.
I gotcha.
All right, so a couple more here. So you lift very, 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 very heavy. So what do you do for mobility and flexibility?
I mean, nothing like super dedicated for. Like I do some foam rolling for my back, and I roll on a lacrosse ball for my piriformis. But other than that, I let the lift stretch themselves. So like before I bench, I might do like some extended range of motion push-ups or some dips, or like some dumbbell press with like a big elbow flare just to stretch my shoulders and pecs out. Before I squat, well, usually I'll just put like 135 on the bar and squat down and just hang out there for like 2 or 3 minutes to let my hips stretch and open up. And before I deadlift, I'll do RDLs to stretch out my hamstrings, make sure my hips are all supple and ready to deadlift. But in terms of like really dedicate, and I do some breathing work as well. But for the most part, I just let like full range of motion lifts stretch themselves. Just put a sub-max weight on the bar, take it through a longer range of motion than I typically would, and then when I do the regular lifts, I have more than enough mobility for it.
Do you find that because that actually interests me? Do you find that putting a real light weight on the barbell and going down and holding it works better than saying stretching or foam rolling for like 10 minutes?
I've found so. I mean, like I said, it's usually like 135 or 225, and I'll go down and take like 10 or 20 deep breaths at the bottom, and then do maybe like 15 or 20 reps just like bouncing up and down like a couple inches above parallel to a couple inches below parallel, just bouncing up and down, to get a little more of a ballistic stretch, and then I'll do 5 or 10 like full range of motion lifts, and then back it, and I'm good to go.
Okay, all right. Sounds. I might experiment with that a little bit myself with like 80 pounds. Because 225. Yeah, I just. Yep. Nope. No. That's. Yeah. All right. So this is the fun one that I came up with today. So this is a fill in the blank, Greg. So you get to fill in the blank here. Chuck Norris doesn't do push-ups. He pushes the earth down. When Greg Nuckols does squats, he fill in the blank.
I don't know. I squat.
I don't know. I for some reason that popped, like after watching your video where you did like 700 pounds, that popped in my head, and I was like, let's see what Greg says to that.
Usually when I squat, I sing Katy Perry, but those two aren't necessarily connected.
You're singing Katy Perry. Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's my lifting music. Like my go-to training playlist is Katy Perry and Kesha and Taylor Swift and Lorde.
You know, I usually ask most of my guests what the guilty pleasure on their playlist is, but I think your playlist is everyone's guilty pleasure.
I mean, it's fantastic. I liked death metal in my young and rebellious phase, but now I just like, catchy pop songs. They're upbeat. They put me in a good mood to lift. Yeah. I feel like guilty pleasures are only relative to your concept of guilt, and I don't see why someone would feel guilty about subjective music choices.
True. I agree with that. I don't know. Sometimes I turn into a music snob. I can't help it. I grew up in like classic rock and studying a little bit of like classical music and understanding how it moves. It's sometimes with pop music, I'm like, but there's no movement.
Oh, that's my working playlist. I just put on a Spotify station based on either Beethoven or Brahms, depending what kind of mood I'm in. But no, training is mostly just top 10 pop hits from female artists for the most part.
I like that. That's cool. So, Greg, if people are interested in reading about you and finding out more about Greg Nuckols, where can they find you on the internet?
Well, I feel like this podcast has been on the whole more personal than training related for the most part. And if you want that, my personal Facebook is probably the best place to go. It's probably about a third training and 2/3 pictures of beer and my dog. In terms of training stuff, my business page is Strength and Science on Facebook, Strength_Science. And my website is gregnuckols.com, but it's all training. There's not really very much personal on there. But
okay.
So if you want training stuff, my website's the place to go. If I haven't come off as too weird during this podcast, then, or if I did come off as too weird and you want more of the weirdness, then my personal Facebook is probably the best place for more of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Greg. I have enjoyed it in getting to know Greg Nuckols, and I hope everyone here has enjoyed it. If you're looking for powerlifting ideas or want to know how to better improve lifts or just read about some really cool science behind weightlifting, please check out Greg's site. It's wonderful. I'll put all of this in the show notes so everyone can have it. But I want to thank you again for coming on the show, Greg.
Thanks for having me.
No problem.